Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video we are continuing our look at the Saviours of Kamigawa decks, and we're going to look at Soratami's Wisdom, which is a blue and white deck. So let's look at the deck list. So we have 22 creatures, 6 instants, 5 enchantments, 3 sorceries, 1 artifact, 23 land, mana curve off to the side there. Let's start looking at this one. So, theme of the deck. So in the last video, Critical Mass, I mentioned the Saviours of Kamigawa theme, which was Wisdom, which was basically there was a bunch of cards that cared about how many cards you had in your hand, which basically led to this kind of play state where you didn't really want to then cast your play your cards, because it would make your cards that cared about the number of cards in your hand worse. So it led to these kind of like really long, slow, drawn out games because you wanted to obviously get maximum effect from, I don't know, not great in my opinion. Like you want to be able to cast your spells and still have a good time. But anyway, so let's look at the two rares of the deck first. So the first rare is Kami of the Crescent Moon. This is okay, I think. This is an okay rare for the deck. So double blue for a 1/3. And it's basically Howling Mine. At the beginning of each player's draw step, they draw a card. This isn't wonderful because your opponent's actually going to benefit from it first when you play it. I don't think there's any ways of kind of sneaking this guy out instant speed as far as I know. But yeah. But yeah, at the very least, I guess it benefit. I mean, if it just benefits you, it'd be a lot more expensive, I suppose. But yeah, not wonderful that it benefits your opponent first after you play it. But yeah, it helps with this deck. You're drawing extra cards then, which is what a lot of the cards in the deck care about. So the other rare is Soramarrow, First to Dream. So this was a cycle of rare spirits, or like these marrow spirits, and they all care about how many cards are in your hand, and they all have various effects. So this guy is 6 mana for a XX flyer. Power toughs are equal to the number of cards in your hand, and you can pay 4, return a land you control back to owner's hand to draw a card. So this has like the Soratami ability. I talked a little bit about the Soratami in the ninjutsu deck. How I don't think they were very popular because they all had these abilities where you had to pay mana and return lands you controlled back to your hand. So essentially, like setting yourself back to kind of get a very mild effect. And that's we've got here. So I mean, by paying his ability, I guess he's increasing his power and toughness by 2, I suppose. But you're like also setting yourself back a turn by returning a land. But then I suppose you could say he's 6 mana. By the time you've got it out, you then maybe don't need the land as much. I don't know. I'm not keen. I'm not keen on Soromarrow, honestly. But that's just my thoughts. He might be a little bit too expensive, I think, for what he does, because what he's costed, I would say, is if you'd probably want him to be like a 4/4 at minimum, right? Because then that's like air elemental size. I don't know. It's okay. It's okay. A single graceful adept, so 3 mana for 1/3. You have no maximum hand size, which I think can merit in this deck. There's a fair amount of card draw, so having no maximum hand size, I think, would actually be okay. And 2 Minamo Scroll Keepers, just in case having no maximum hand size just isn't enough, or you can't draw Graceful Adept. Minamo Scroll Keeper is 2 mana for 2/3 with Defender, so actually a pretty decently sized Defender, I suppose, for 2 mana. And increase your maximum hand size by 1. So that's okay. There's a few cards in Saviours that play with hand size either increasing or decreasing. I just think it's kind of interesting design space to work with. I think these days we just, if we get anything about hand size, it just goes, it's like Spellbook or like Reliquary Tower. It's just like, yeah, you got no maximum hand size. Let's not worry about like ticking up or ticking it down or, Anyway. So, some cards that care about how many cards you have in your hand. So, Descendant of Kiyomarrow. 3 mana for a 2/3. As long as you have more cards in hand than each opponent, gets +1/+2 and has, whenever this creature deals combat damage, you gain 3 life. Couldn't just be, you gain life equal to its power or something, or whenever it deals damage, you gain that much life, like a normal Spirit Link ability. No, it has to be hard capped at 3, apparently. Yeah, I guess. I mean, 3 mana to me is as 2/3 baseline is okay. And what he becomes 3/5. if you've got more cards in hand, which you're likely to do. Yeah, I think it's okay. It's okay. And then Descendant of Soramaro, who's 4 mana for a 2/3. 1 color and 1 blue. Look at the top X cards of your library, X is the number of cards in your hand, then putting them back in the order. That's okay as well. Yeah, at least, unlike Descendant of Kiyomaro, who is relying on you to have more cards in hand than your opponent, Descendant of Soramaro is always going to do something, even if it's just like look at the top 1 card or 2 cards or something. At least it does something, I guess. And then we have a pair of terrible Kitsune. Kitsune really got dealt dirty in this set. Like, honestly, all the Kitsune cards that I can think of are just so bad. So, Kitsune Bone Setter, let's really break this down. So, 3 mana for a 0/1, so immediately, pretty dreadful. Tap, prevent the next 3 damage that would be dealt to target creature this turn. So you think, okay, well, it prevents 3 damage. So maybe being a 0/1 for 3 mana is not terrible, because preventing 3 damage is quite a lot of damage. Oh, but you can only play the ability if you have more cards in hand than each opponent. So for 3 mana, you're getting a 0/1 that prevents damage, but only, again, it's conditional. And I don't know why this isn't just like, I mean, to me, like, the easiest fix is like prevent the next X damage, where X is the number of cards in your hand, right? Because then that's just immediately, there's no hoop to jump through then, really. I don't know. And also give it a power, like, just make it a 2/2 for God's sake, Don't know why it's so underpowered and overcosted. Then 2 Kitsune Lore Weavers, it's 2 mana for a 2/1. 1 card and 1 white gets +0/+X to turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. I think this could have been just a 2/2 for 2. I don't think that would have like been overpowering and still had the ability. I mean, increasing just toughness is like, kind of weak, honestly. I understand obviously why it's not +X/+X, because that's kind of more, I think, Green's territory. But yeah, it's fine. I mean, it becomes an effective blocker, I guess. Single Eiganjo Free Riders, 4 mana for 3/4 flyer. At the beginning of your upkeep, return a white creature you control to owner's hand. Yeah, I don't think you actually have too many white creatures you could do this with. Because there was at least this way of guaranteeing cards in your hand, right? And you can return itself if it really needs to. There was a whole cycle of these cards and Saviours where they were kind of like okay costed for their size, but like you had to return a creature of their color back to your hand every turn. So yeah. You could do the Kitsune Lore Weaver, I guess, and that's 2 mana, but like, is that worth doing just to keep a 3/4 flyer around? I don't know. A single Kiri Honor, so 5 mana for a 2/2. When it comes into play, you bounce a creature, which is pretty solid. And whenever you play a Spirit Arcane spell, you can return Kiri Honor back to owner's hand, so you can do it again. So that's okay, I think. A little expensive, obviously, I think, at 5 mana for a 2/2. When you have, like, in earlier sets, you have, like, I don't know, I feel like the milestone is, like, Mana War, which was 3 mana for a 2/2 that does exactly this, but it doesn't have the bounce ability. So yeah, it's definitely overcosted, but it's okay. Regarding how many Spirit Arcane spells, I don't think you actually have too many in this deck, so don't know how often that ability would have gone off, because we had not seen. Oh, we have a few spirits actually. Kami of the Crescent Moon and Soramaro spirits. Okay, maybe. And then a single Floodbringer. So 2 mana for a 1/2 flyer. To return a land you control to owner's hand to tap a land. Again, is that worth setting yourself back a turn? I mean, I suppose you can do this on, maybe lands that have utility effects or that are going to produce more than 1 mana, but yeah, I don't know. I think this is just Stormcrow. I mean, it's technically better than Stormcrow because it has like an ability and no drawback. But yeah. All the Soratami I'm really disappointed with, which is a shame because this deck is full of them and they're all very disappointing in my opinion. So let's look through all these. So 2 Moonbow Illusionist, 3 mana for a 2/1 flyer, 2 return a land you control to owner's hand. A land's type becomes the basic land type of your choice until end turn. When is that ever worth returning a land to your hand to do that? Like, you're setting yourself back a whole turn just to change a land's type until end of turn. Like, no, I'm sorry, you're a 2/1 flyer. A Boro Envoy, 2 of these. Um, 4 mana for a 1/3 flyer, so even worse stats. 2 return land you control to owner's hand. Target creature gets -X/-0. Famous misprint. It should say until end of turn. It doesn't, so it's not permanent effect because that would actually be quite exciting. -X/-0 to end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. It's just a shrink effect, isn't it? And like, again, just a shrink effect is not worth kind of holding onto a bunch of cards to make it decent, and then also setting yourself back a turn by retaining land. I know I keep going on about setting yourself back a turn, but it really is. Soratami Cloud Skater. This is at least like a loot effect, I suppose. What, 1/1 flyer for 2, bounce land back to your hand, draw a card, and then discard a card. So I suppose at the very least you could discard the land you've just returned to your hand, like if you don't need it. Sure. And Soratami Rain Shaper, 3 mana for a 2/1 flyer. 3, so a bit more expensive than all the others. Return a land you control to its hand. Target creature you control can't be the target of spells or abilities this turn. That's okay. Like, to give Shroud, essentially. But I don't know why you need to return land. Like, just make it like 3 mana and like a tap ability. Why does it? I don't know why they really double down on this theme of like, we're going to have the Soratami return lands back to your hand. People will love that. They didn't. Anyway, moving on to non-creature spells. So quite a lot of auras actually in this deck. So 2 Cage of Hands. Cage of Hands I think is actually pretty good because this is basically pacifism that you can return to your hand to cast on something else. So Cage of Hands is actually pretty good. It's a little more expensive than pacifism, but with it becomes flexibility. You know, when the thing that has been pacified is no longer a threat, you can bounce it. You can get Cage back and cast it again on something else. So Cage of Hands is all right. And on the subject of pacifism, Cowed by Wisdom is a terrible pacifism. So it's 1 white mana for an aura. In charge, creature can't attack or block unless its controller pays 1 for every card in your hand. So I mean, if they have enough mana, they can just do it anyway. Like, almost I'd say 99% of the time you are better just you doing just normal pacifism, because pacifism is just like you can't attack or block, full stop. None of this, oh, you can attack or block if you want to pay some mana into doing it. Yeah, I don't know if that's worth dropping this like a turn earlier. You know, it's just worse than pacifism. Like, ugh, it's just bad. So many of these cards are just bad. Not Freed from the Reel. Freed from the Reel is great. Freed from the Reel is absolute combo fuel. So 3 mana aura, 1 blue tap enchanted creature, 1 blue untap enchanted creature. So I mean, you put this on any creature that produces more than 2 mana, and you've got a way of like producing like blue mana in some way. Yeah, I mean that's infinite mana, isn't it? Right there. So yeah, Freed from the Reel is pretty good. I do like it has this this utility that you can put it on like an opponent's creature and just like pay the blue to keep maybe tapping their creature. That is absolutely not the best use for it. It's always better on one of your creatures. Unfortunately, I just don't think there's anything in this deck that really benefits from Freed from the Reel, but it is absolute combo fuel in like constructed decks. What else we got here? Right, so we got Charge Across the Araba. Oh, let's talk about more terrible spells. So sweep spells are a thing in Saviours. So sweep spells require you to you know, there's a theme here: return land to your hand. And the more lands you return to your hand, the bigger the effect is. So Charge Across the Araba is 5 mana. Sweep, return any number of planes you control to owner's hand, and creature you control get +1/+1 until end turn for every planes you return this way. So, yeah. I mean, you could do this, say, on turn 5, say you've just played only planes, and you've got creatures out. Let's do Charge Across the Araba, and return all my planes to my hand, and all my creatures get +5/+5 to end turn. Sure, that could work. That could be a thing. Yeah, look, that's like the dream scenario. But you're not likely really going to want to do that, are you, I suppose? I mean, it is instant, so it could come out of nowhere. You could do it in the middle of combat and just go like, I absolutely need to win this turn, Charge Across the Araba, sweep everything away, but yeah, I think just sweep is like such a bad mechanic. It's like it's really unliked, I think. We have a single Hail of Arrows. Hail of Arrows, I think this is okay. So X and 1 white. X damage divided you choose amongst any number of attacking creatures. I think that's okay. You know, you get attacked by a swarm of creatures. Even, you know, being able to put 3 mana into this and like pick off 3 toughness worth of things, I think that's okay. Hail of Arrows is all right in my book. Not wonderful, but it's okay. Overwhelming Intellect, this is a very expensive counterspell, 6 mana, to counter just a creature spell as well, but then you draw cards equal to the spell's mana value, which, there's a lot of overcosted cards in Kamigawa, so you'd actually draw quite a few cards from this, but 6 mana for a counterspell is and conditional as well, because it only affects creature spells, that's rough. And another sweep spell, so 2 copies of Plow Through Rato, so 2 mana. This is like Charge Across the Araba, except it only affects 1 creature. So like I'd say if anything, I'd say it's actually worse, because like you're still returning like a bunch of lands back to your hand, but only to affect like 1 creature, and it only gives +1/+1. If it gave like +2/+2 for every planes you return, then yeah, there could be some argument it being better over, say, Charge Across the Araba. Out of all the sweep spells, Charge Across the Araba is probably the best, just because it is affects your whole board, but saying it's the best sweep spell is not really a compliment, honestly. Single Tarashi's Verdict, this is fine. 2 mana, destroys an attacker creature with power 3 or less. Obligatory mention, like, such a shame we never got a Tarashi's card, but I'm really glad if Sod's Law, if we got Tarashi, it probably would have been Saviours, and you would have had something to do with, like, oh, if you've got 7 or more cards in your hand, you gain 2 life or something really terrible like that. 2 Council of the Soratami, just a straight draw 2 for 3. Yeah, perfectly fine. A single Presence of the Wise, 4 mana, sorcery. You gain 2 life for every card in your hand. So what, at 4 mana, you want this to probably be giving you what? I'd say at least 8 life to make paying 4 mana worthwhile. Yeah, I don't know. I just think there's much better things to do with 4 mana than just gain a little bit of life. I mean, it helps, obviously, kind of like, give you a bit of like padding against an opponent, but yeah, it just gains life. That's all it does, and like not a significant amount of life either, really. And a single Hankaiyu, so 1 mana equipment. Equipped creature has put an aim counter on Hankaiyu, and tap remove all aim counters from Hankaiyu. Does damage to target creature or player equal to the number of aim counters you remove. So I used to think this was okay. And then I saw it's like equip 4, so it's very expensive to equip. The one benefit I think is that oh, actually, this goes amazing with Freed from the Real, actually, because you could just pour a load of blue mana to keep, to tap, put an aim counter, untap, do it again. So that, I think that's actually like not a terrible combo. And the fact as well, like Hankaiyu, the counters go on Hankaiyu, not on the creature. So like you could tap, put a counter on it. If you really wanted to equip it to another creature, tap, put another aim counter if you really, really wanted to. But I think the main combo here is with Freed from the Reals, where you could just do that and potentially build up and then just do a big game-ending shot from it. So what could have been? So as you can see, there's quite a few cards here that I think could have been hit, because I do not think this deck is put together very well at all. I actually owned this deck and I played it out of the box and I hated it. It was such a miserable, slow game using this deck. So what? Honden of Seeing wins. Draws you cards. Why is this not in here? It's like a guaranteed card every turn. Honden of Cleansing Fire as well gives you life, so it helps you stall out, which is again also what the deck is trying to do. And then you have the 2 shrines out, then you're drawing an extra 2 cards and you're getting 4 life every turn. So that's 100% what the deck wants to do. And I don't know why the Hondens aren't in here. Sire of the Storm gives you a card draw every time you play a Spirit or Arcane spell, which you don't have a lot of in this deck, but at the end of the day, it's also a 3/3 flyer. You need to win the game somehow. And I don't think there's really that many win conditions in this deck either, honestly. Rushing Tide Zubera is 4 mana for a 3/3, which is fairly decently costed. And if it dies, if 4 or more damage was dealt to it, you get to draw 3 cards, which is pretty good. And also the art for some reason looks like a Xenomorph. I have no idea why. But again, card that could have been here. Secret Keeper is a spirit that I think it's normally, I've covered up the power and toughness because I'm clever, but I think it's like normally like a 2/2, and if you've got more cards in hand than your opponent, it gets a power toughness boost and gets flying, and again, it's a way to actually end the game. Inner Chamber Guard is this defender. It's like a 0/2 with Bushido 2, Consuming Vortex, just a bounce spell, a cheap bounce spell as well. Soratami Savant is 4 mana for a 2/2 flyer, which counters spells. So that's an effect you wouldn't mind, I think, returning a land back to a hand for. And as an alternate rare, instead of, I would say Soromarrow maybe, Kiyomarrow, who's 5 mana for an XX. Parent offers equal to the number of cards in your hand. If you've got 4 more cards in your hand, he's got Vigilance, and if you've got 7 or more cards in hand, whenever he deals damage, you get 7 life. So maybe, I don't know. But in summary, yeah, I do not like this deck. It's not helped by blue white is my least favorite color combination. And yeah, this deck just feels very slow, very dirtly. It doesn't really feel like it has a win condition. I think it all seems to be hinging on attack with some very weak Soratami, who are, at most, 2/1 flyers, or just hold out until like you draw Soromarrow and then like just attack in the air like once or twice with him when he's a decent size, but everything up until then is like, I know, kind of holding down the fort until you eventually draw that, which you might. There's enough card draw, but yeah, I do not like this deck. I say I did have this one. I played it out of the box, and I hated it. It was such a long, miserable game. But anyway, but that's my thoughts on it. What are your thoughts on this deck after seeing it? Did you also own it? Did you have a similar experience, or maybe you had a better experience with this deck? Please put a comment below. I'd really like to know your stories about this deck. But I'll be back next time to look at another Saviours of Kamigawa deck. But until then, thank you for watching and listening, and have a great day.